This is Voicemail, the Universal Postal Union's podcast covering the wonderful world of mail. I'm your host, Ian Kerr. In this episode, I'm joined by Andre Mayeris, Head of E-commerce and Cargo Operations at the International Air Transport Association. Joining me on the line is Andre Mayeris. Andre is the Head of E-commerce and Cargo Operations at the International Air Transport Association. We call it IATA or IATA. How do people pronounce it?
Oh, I pronounce it IATA, but I know that some people would pronounce it like letter by letter, IATA. I heard that in the past, but IATA will do, yeah.
Let's go with IATA for the sake of brevity. Andre, let's start with the question that we ask all of our guests. What is your first memory of the post?
Yeah, so first memory of the post is obviously because I'm old. As a child, traveling with my family, we always used to send postcards to friends and the rest of the family that couldn't travel with us. And at that time, obviously, there was no internet. There was no internet to send emails. There was no smartphones to send pictures. So the only way actually to report on the trip was the postcard. And we were sharing, of course, our experience with the family like that. And also at home, when my parents would come home with the mail, I would immediately ask if there was something for me. And when there was nothing for me, well, then my mother would tell me, well, then write to people. And if you write to people, then people would write back to you. And that's what I did. So every time I was getting a postcard, I was extremely excited. It would stay in the living room for a while. And I had a special postcard box, actually, that I was using. And I was storing them in there and looking at them from time to time. But nowadays, I'm still sending postcards. Still, I'm one of the few, I guess. And I receive a few as well, maybe not as much as I had before. And I receive quite a few also from my postal colleagues with whom I'm working. So, that's pretty much the memory.
Andre, let's move on to a bit more about what IATA does. So tell us, what does IATA do specifically in the areas of cargo and e-commerce? And maybe you can share what your department's current priorities are.
Yeah, right. So IATA, we have a vision at IATA. It's to work together with the industry to shape the future growth for a safe, obviously, secure, sustainable air transport industry. And our mission is to represent the airline industry, to lead the airline industry, and to serve the airline industry. So we represent them by advocating to regulators, governments, and so on. We lead them by providing some guidance and creating the standards that they will use around the globe. And we serve them also by providing expertise and also a wide range of products, obviously, that are associated to it. And then specifically for cargo, our role is to enable global trade. So IATA represents today around, I think, 320 airlines, approximately, more or less. And while we think that cargo is transported in cargo aircrafts, well, actually, cargo is flown everywhere. I mean, on every type of aircraft and mostly in the belly of passenger aircraft. Today, approximately 65 million tons of goods are sent every year. That represents around 35% of global trade by value. This is less than 1% of the trade by volume. It's equivalent to $8.5 trillion worth of goods annually and approximately $23 billion every day. So for these reasons, to enable that global trade, in the cargo department, we have three priorities. The first one is always safety and security. We want people to be safe on board. We want the aircraft to be safe. We want the crew attendants to be safe. We want the cargo to be safe as well. So we look at safety and security together with other organizations like ICAO, WCO, and so on. We look at the battery challenge, the lithium battery challenge, and soon the sodium battery challenge when it's undeclared in cargo and mail shipments. We look at digitalization. This is extremely important. We have the feeling that we are approximately 15 years behind other industries. So that's why we have to really put some emphasis on the digitalization of documents and processes in our industry. We have way too many documents, paper documents or messaging. So we look at now data exchange. change. I can explain more a little bit later if you want. Then sustainability is definitely a commitment from the airline industry. We are very often pointed at as being the CO2 emitters. So we have to do something in order to reduce the carbon dioxide emissions. Comes to fuel, but not only fuel. In the cargo department, we are looking at all the processes that are happening on the ground, and we look at where we use plastic, we use shoring material, spreading material, how we are going to recycle those, how we are going to reuse them, etc., etc. Safety, security, digitalization, and sustainability is definitely the three priorities that we have in the cargo team. And in addition to this, then we are focusing also on e-commerce. And e-commerce, as we understand it, e-commerce is cargo or e-commerce is mail, right? We have two streams that we can use whenever e-commerce is sent by air. 2023, the e-commerce was valued at approximately 5.8 trillion US dollars in sales, and it's expected obviously to grow. We've seen in the last decade how it was growing. Well, we can see pretty much the same growth in the next years. 60% of that is cross-border, and 80% of the cross-border e-commerce is transported by air. So we know that air cargo is an essential component for cross-border e-commerce. So that's why we are looking at the optimization of processes on the ground to make sure that we can speed up the handling of the shipments. Just for example, a fun fact from China today. It's the largest e-commerce market, obviously, in the world. They send every day the equivalent of 70 Boeing 747 full of cross-border e-commerce per day, out of 200 freighters. So 70 out of 200 freighters are fully loaded with cross-border e-commerce every day. That represents approximately 37% of the goods being sent. Generally, worldwide, we can say that one package out of 5 is coming from an e-commerce transaction, and this is projected to one package out of 3 in 2027, so very, very soon. So we can see the increase, obviously, in consumers' behavior as well, in ordering online and the wish to have everything delivered at the doorstep immediately. So what we do, we ensure that the air cargo industry has the right regulations in place, standards, a global framework to offer the right logistics for the e-commerce industry. And we are looking at solutions, what we call the excellence in operations. So we look at the standards and everything that we can do beyond the standards in order to become even more efficient. Just to finish on that e-commerce work that we do in 2020, I think it was, we did a study with a consulting company, PwC, and we looked at the top 50 global e-tailers on the planet to understand how they operate, what is their business model, what is their logistics model as well. And then we looked at the gaps with our existing standards. And we actually found out that operationally, we are quite fit for e-commerce. We do have the right standards in place. It's all an effort now on implementation and consistency in using those standards. But the huge effort that we have to make is on the digitalization side. So digitization of documentation and messaging, but digitalization of processes as well at the airport, to the airport at destination, to include all the stakeholders of that air cargo industry. Because for e-commerce, unless you are an integrator, as we call it, like a DHL or a UPS that controls the entire supply chain, most of the traditional air carriers have partners at the very beginning of the supply chain and at the very end of the supply chain. So we need the effort of all the actors of the supply chain digitally to integrate and then physically to integrate as well to make it happen. So that's pretty much what we do on the e-commerce side in air cargo in our department.
Now, Andre, you've thrown an array of statistics at us there. And I've got a statistic of my own. According to my notes, IATA members cover around 83% of global air traffic. So how do you see the impact of the aviation industry on socioeconomic development? And are there any challenges and opportunities that it brings to those developing economies?
Yep, indeed. We represent today 83% of the global traffic. We do have a significantly impact on socioeconomic developments, that's for sure, especially in developing economies. Today, aviation enhances the global connectivity. It's with the network all around the globe. Obviously, you can now connect people together. So that enables tourism, for example, cultural exchange. And within cargo, in my area, it enables trade, as I just mentioned before. So it drives economic growth. Definitely. It generates employment also. You can look now at various airports. It will attract a lot of companies. It will develop some businesses. It will hire a lot of people. It will contribute to the GDP in those countries. And it will also attract foreign investments. And finally, let's say for the socioeconomic impact, it promotes also the infrastructure development of airports and all the related infrastructure around the airport that is stimulating the local economies. We can see it as a little village. I mean, an airport, you have, of course, everyone that is working at an airport, but you should think about everything that is happening around. When you have the freight forwarders that have their businesses around the airport, what the people that they employ as a consequence, and then the development of the towns and the villages all around, because people are coming to work in that area. So it's a real big development that is generated by aviation, and it creates these opportunities to increase, again, the tourist inflow, to benefit the local businesses and communities, to facilitate the export and the import of goods. We were talking about e-commerce just a few seconds ago. Today, thanks to e-commerce, pretty much anyone could just open a shop and then start selling. If you have that connectivity around you, well, then you can start doing your exports and imports. And then also one thing that we tend to forget, it develops also skills, creates the demand for skilled labor, which is improving the local workforce capability. So all of that together is what I would believe is a socioeconomic impact on certain areas, thanks to aviation. And because I was mentioning sustainability, I will not forget that aviation also supports 15 of the 17 UN SDGs, the UN, United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, by helping in case of emergencies in certain regions due to earthquakes or floodings or whatsoever. Aviation is helping in that area. When there was COVID, we were the ones sending the vaccines and the protective equipment in the various areas, and so on and so on. So we are very, very proud of our impact on socioeconomic developments.
And you just mentioned COVID there, and that's my next question is going to be about what happened after COVID. So can you tell us a bit about how IATA helped its members and its partners recover post-pandemic? And indeed, have there been any long-lasting, say, implications or sort of changes that have come out of the pandemic, things that will stay with us in this post-pandemic era?
Yes, yeah. So indeed, COVID-19 has not been very kind to anyone. So we had to react extremely quickly to support our member airlines and all the other actors in the industry to continue business as much as possible. So passenger traffic was to a halt completely. Cargo was still be transported by air, and we had to very, very quickly work to be resilient. So what we did together with governments, together with the airlines as well, and the various UN organizations, we worked with governments to help establish consistent travel protocols to restore passenger confidence and also facilitate the smoother travel processes. We also promoted the use of digital health passes. We had an IATA travel pass that we had to streamline the verifications of COVID-19 test results and vaccination records. So when you go to a check-in counter, you could just show your pass. We definitely were extremely quick at helping on the distribution of vital cargo, crucial cargo like protective equipment I mentioned, and the vaccines. IATA and its airline members played a critical role in the global distribution of those vaccines. We leveraged the network and the expertise in the logistic to make sure that we could deliver to those in needs. If you remember, maybe it was in the news, but we have transformed passenger aircrafts into freighters. We called them the Praetors at the time, so passenger freighters, Praetors, to ensure capacity, obviously, to have enough space to carry those vaccines around the world, and to have the network, just like you have a postal network that is definitely excellent at the national level to reach the doorsteps. Well, we had the global network to reach the various countries around the world. And something we did also for COVID-19, we secured the financial relief for the airlines. We lobbied for financial support and relief measures for airlines to mitigate the economic impact of the pandemic. So we had to really quickly act on that. And it worked pretty well because the airline industry has recovered today from COVID-19. It took a few years, but we have recovered. Now, you mentioned the long-lasting implications from the pandemic. Well, I can see two main ones. The first one is the importance of air cargo is recognized today, particularly again in e-commerce. We had to live our lives online during the pandemic. We didn't have any access to store, and we had that convenience of delivery at home. So this is now here to stay. So importance of air cargo is definitely recognized. And then I think there was also a change in mindsets at the very high level of the organization, at the decision makers level. The pandemic has really accelerated the adoption of digital technologies, I believe, including what we call the contactless touch points. For example, at check-in today, you can check in at the airport, going on board an aircraft without having any interaction with any human being. The boarding process is exactly the same. In the cargo world, we start doing the same. We have more and more digitalized processes where actually we don't need any human interaction anymore, or we minimize that human interaction. And this is likely to remain a standard practices. So I think these two actually areas are really remaining today. Yes.
Now, Andre, in 2025, IATA will celebrate its 80th anniversary, if I've understood correctly. Now, obviously, the industry has changed a lot since then, but how's IATA's mission and its work changed over that time? And you've just mentioned e-commerce and how we live our lives online. How has that all impacted on IATA's main priorities?
IATA's priority, let's say, has always been, I wouldn't say the same, but we've always been working to achieve safe, reliable, secure, efficient air transport of passengers and cargo. And specifically in relation to e-commerce today in our area, that requires speed and efficiency. So the work has changed in a way that we are now working more, focusing on various streams, like sharing digital information. So as I said, digitalization is definitely something that has changed within IATA and within the airline industry. We have developed what we call One Record. It's a standard that allows data exchange throughout the supply chain. It's real-time data, actually, that is, I would say, posted online. It's the best description I could do. Instead of sending messages from point A to point B, it's actually posted online and it's accessible to anyone who needs it, right, in real time. And the good thing is also that the data is posted by the owner of the data. So it's the true data that is posted and is accessible online to those that need it. And IATA has developed this platform for everyone to connect and then receive information. With that, it allows planning, mitigation in case of deviation in the planning. If now suddenly you have an aircraft that needs to be rerouted to another place, so you can replan actually the entire journey of cargo. And One Record, this IATA platform, really really, really helps to that. So data exchange using APIs is definitely something that has changed within IATA and the airline industry, and we are still working towards that, but it's already implemented by some. Also, again, in digitalization, we are digitalizing the customs and trade facilitation processes. Some countries have made notable progress in developing and implementing strategies to facilitate trade and streamline the border operations. I give you an example. Brazil, for example. Brazil has adopted IATA's Advanced Cargo Information digital standard, and this has helped to speed up the cargo clearance on arrival. And believe it or not, from 5 days to just 5 hours. So this is really, really a progress, and this is thanks to all the efforts that we put into the digitalization area. Still talking about digital shipment tracking, the growth in the transport of pharmaceuticals by air, and also the rise in e-commerce. This has led to an increase in demand for real-time shipment tracking, and shippers, cargo handlers, and all other stakeholders want to know the procedures and requirements for the approval and use of the tracking devices and data loggers, because these data loggers that transmit, that help us to do the tracking, could have interferences with aircraft avionics. So we can only use those that are really approved, and we are facilitating actually not the approval of those, but actually the information to airlines and shippers and forwarders about those devices that are approved for air transport. And then we have also developed interactive cargo guidance. This is a common framework that so that tracking devices can monitor the quality and accuracy of conditions of time and temperature sensitive goods. So this in the cargo area is definitely something that has changed from the last, I would even say, 5 years. So digitalization, data.
So continuing this theme of digitalization, probably the same thing, and the increasing importance of data. Let's talk about, sustainability. So is data playing a role in the exchange of data in trying to create a more sustainable air transport network?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to come back to digitalization, someone once told me there is a difference, actually. Digitization would be documents and messages, so that you digitize numerical or messaging. And digitalization is about processes. So when you do an action, you are using technology in order to do the process and capture data that you can use afterwards. So
we've learned something today, everybody.
That's what I learned, actually. I hope I'm right. So yeah, just to come back to your question, the role of data in facilitating secure and sustainable airport, well, it's crucial. Definitely, it's crucial. End-to-end digitalization is what people want. I mean, I've been talking to airlines, I've been talking to freight forwarders, I've been talking to e-commerce players, the Alibaba, Lazada, JD, Cainiao, the logistics arm of Alibaba, and so on. And definitely, when we talk about how we can facilitate all that, it's definitely, we need to think end to end. We cannot just think for our own segment. We really need to think end to end. And again, the platform I mentioned before, One Record, for example, this provides standardized data sharing framework that would enhance the visibility, the transparency of cargo movements throughout the supply chain. And the framework uses a common data model and secure web APIs to ensure that all the stakeholders have access to accurate and timely data. It's also enhancing security by creating a single secure digital record of each shipment. And that platform, One Record, reduces the risk of data breaches, and it ensures that sensitive cargo information is protected throughout the journey. We also use then the data to know about the movements of cargo, which helps us look at optimizing the processes for a more sustainable air transport, pretty much.
Let's talk about partnerships with the postal sector now. How does IATA work with the postal sector and the UPU to achieve these well, let's call them common goals. What are some of the common challenges and the main synergies between
Mm-hmm.
posts and airlines?
Yeah, at IATA, within our cargo division, we have various what we call boards. They are in charge of various areas of expertise within cargo, and one of them is the Air Mail Board. It's composed of 12 member airlines. They are represented by their experts in this domain from their own airline, and they are meeting from time to time, face to face, via teleconferences, and they talk about the challenges that they face within their own airline and maybe within the whole industry. So that's how we get the feedback, also the pulse from the airlines. And then we are extremely lucky that twice a year we have our relationship with the UPU through an IATA UPU contact committee. We meet once in March during the IATA World Cargo Symposium, and once in October, usually at the UPU headquarters in Bern. And then, of course, in between, we have expert teams with the UPU to jointly manage some of those challenges. Some of those challenges are related to operational issues like backlogs during peak seasons, or the lack of capacity on aircrafts, and how we can solve that. Some others are about communication and data sharing. Again, we do a lot of work in this area. And I would say that this is where the most important synergy or opportunity resides today. And we need definitely to close the gap between postal processes and airline processes for a better seamless operation. We have different contracts, different booking processes, different SLAs. We have different messaging system. We have different safety, security standards, and so on and so on. So IATA and UPU, we are extremely eager to close these gaps and make sure that we are aligned on these processes.
Well, that sort of leads me to what my next question was going to be, which is about trying to increase this current level of cooperation. So, are there any sort of joint projects, perhaps, or that we can share that you can sort of elaborate on a little bit?
Oh yeah, sure. So first of all, IATA and UPU are in a relationship for the last 70 years. So this is one of the oldest relationship that we have. We have also another relationship with ICAO and WCO. We all work together. We created what we call the quadrilateral meeting so that we can look at synergies, overlaps, and make sure that we are more efficient between the four organizations. But current level of cooperation between IATA and the UPU honestly has never been better. And the first reason for that, and I have to name him, it's because of Mr. Jan Bożnanski. He's the UPU's postal supply chain coordinator, and he really managed to bring the postal sector together and with the airlines in our IATA UPU contact committee in order to reach consensus. And honestly, without him, the cooperation would not be the same. So I really need to thank him for that. But then, of course, we can always do better, and we are definitely working towards this goal. And today we are looking at achieving better efficiency, digitalization, safety, security, sustainability. And some of the work that we have done in the past is on electronic advanced data. So the sharing of data, particularly for filing to customs. There are huge requirements, regulatory requirements from customs here. And we managed to put together guidance material for the airlines and postal operator. We developed some joint safety guidelines for postal operators as well to ensure a safe transport of mail on aircrafts. We did some safety campaigns on dangerous goods transport, the use of unit load devices. We have looked at paper-free transport as well in order to digitize the industry. We looked at dangerous goods training. We created a postal airway bill number that allowed the synchronization between mail messages and cargo messages. We've developed the electronic consignment security declaration. Whenever mail shipments are screened, we can then inform the next party about a screening that has been processed. And then we have, of course, many other things on our agenda so far. We're looking at the transport of special commodities in airmail, pharmaceuticals, perishables, and so on. We're looking at what we call the high-risk scenarios and the use of ETOEs, the extraterritorial offices of exchange. And we're looking still at the customs requirements for filing information in transshipment scenarios, and so on and so on. So excellent cooperation, but still so much to do.
One of the things that IATA and the UPU have in common is dealing with or representing members who have come from a very diverse range of regions, having different challenges, and still having to find common ground. having to find common ground amongst this diverse membership. So how does IATA work with its 320 members from those 120 countries to articulate a joint industry position?
I guess IATA is just like UPU. We are working with a governance system allowing for airlines to make recommendations and sometimes come to unanimous decisions. We publish those in terms of resolutions and recommended practices. This is the standards that the airline industry is using. And we have those experts actually from the industry coming and debate issues and opportunities. They come with a proposal, and those proposals are then presented to the airlines representatives for air cargo, who are the ultimate decision makers for their respective airlines and for the industry. So that's how we manage to generate those standards for global harmonization. So IATA will always first listen to the voice of the industry and help or guide the industry in making those proposals. But obviously, we also propose ourselves to the airlines where we find efficiencies that could be done. And we have, for those 320 airlines that you mentioned, we have offices worldwide, regional offices that are taking care of the regional airlines so that we can listen to the voice of the region as well.
One final question then. Let's talk about mail transport. In your opinion, what are the most promising trends, whether it's in innovation or technology, that will define the future of mail transport?
That's a great question, the future. So we know that on the digitalization side, we are at least 15 years behind other industry, like the bank sector, for example. So the main trend I see for now is really for the various organizations to embrace transformation through digitalization, which requires not only investment, for sure, but also the entire organization needs to change. The mindset of the organization, needs to change. There's a new generation out there, and they are already used to new technologies. When we want to attract people in the airline industry, very often we get the comment that we are old, it's dusty. So we need to really listen to the next generation and make sure that we transform to make the industry attractive. We have developed this solution again called One Record, the end-to-end digital logistics and transport supply chain, where data is transparently exchanged. That is definitely for me a huge step forward in terms of a trend for the future. If not only the airline industry is adopting this transformation, the digitalization, but if we can manage to have also the postal operators, customs, security authorities, freight forwarders, shippers, and consumer, if everyone is just eager, let's say, to change the mindset and exchange data the way we can do it today, it's already done in other industry, I think we would have achieved a huge milestone. And then, sorry, just one last thing. I can't just forget about sustainability. It's not a trend anymore. I think we realize that every day, but it's a reality we need to take care of today. We need to continue the collaboration. We need to ensure that our impact on the environment is zero, and we have to work for more inclusion and diversity, obviously, in our industries, yes.
Andre Mayeras, Head of E-commerce and Cargo Operations at the International Air Transport Association. Thank you very much for joining us on the UPU Voicemail podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to Voicemail, the official podcast of the Universal Postal Union. Subscribe to the podcast on your favourite podcast platform and you'll get each episode downloaded to the device of your choosing as it's released. My thanks to the team at the UPU for their help putting together this episode. I'm your host, Ian Kerr, and I'll look forward to your company next time on Voicemail, the podcast of the UPU.